loud enough for every nurse in the lobby to hear. Security reached for her paralyzed wife's wheelchair while his mother smiled and his mistress lifted her phone to record. He called it his hospital. Not one of them knew they were making the biggest mistake of their lives. "She is not my concern anymore," Obinna said. "A clean break is kinder," his mother added, folding her hands. "Smile for the camera," Ronke whispered. "This is the last anyone sees of her." The man's name was Obinna Okafor. His wife could not walk. That morning he wheeled her out of the building himself, past the front desk, past the staff who had cared for her for months, and left her on the curb like something the hospital had thrown away. His mother watched and approved. The other woman filmed it, and in Adana's lap, held tight under both hands, was a small, locked wooden box her father had left her. She had never opened it. She did not open it now. He had no idea the woman he was pushing into the cold was the one who quietly held everything he loved. Emotional drama and shocking twists don't are unforgettable stories. And before we begin, Obinna had not always been this cruel. 14 months earlier, Badana Okeke could walk. She was a doctor, a good one. She worked in pediatrics at a small clinic across the city, and she was known for staying late with frightened children until they stopped being frightened. She met Obinna at a fundraiser. He was charming then, ambitious. He talked about building something that mattered. She believed him. Her father did not. Chief Namdi Okeke was a quiet man who had built a great deal and told almost no one. He looked at Obinna for a long moment the first night they met, and later he said only one thing to his daughter. "That man loves the size of a room before he loves the people in it." Adana laughed then. She thought her father was being protective. She married Obinna in the spring. Her father gave her one gift at the wedding, the small wooden box, locked. "When you truly need it, you will open it, not before." She tucked it away and forgot it. Then, 1 year into the marriage, everything changed on a wet road at night. A truck ran a red light. Adana's car folded around it. When she woke in Meridian General, the doctors told her the spine could not be repaired. Not now, maybe not ever. She would not walk again. She did not cry. She learned. She asked for the charts. She read them. She understood the injury better than the residents who explained it to her. She began the long, slow work of building a life inside a body that no longer obeyed. Obinna came less and less. At first he was tender. Then he was busy. Then he was gone by dinner and back after midnight, and he smelled of a perfume she did not own. His mother came to the hospital once a week to remind her of things. "You were a sweet girl, but my son needs a wife who can stand beside him, standing, you understand." Adana understood. She said nothing. There was a name that kept coming up in Obinna's calls, Ronke, the merger strategist, the woman who was going to help him fold 3 clinics and a hospital into one great group and put his name at the top. Ronke's calls ran late. Ronke's laugh came through the phone. In one photo on his desk from a company event, Ronke stood too close to him, her hand flat against his back. She saw it all from her wheelchair. She saw it, and she began to think. 6 weeks before the lobby, a man in a plain suit came to her hospital room. He was older, careful, with steady hands and a soft voice. He introduced himself as Solomon Belogan. "I was your father's attorney. Now I am yours, though you do not yet know what that means." Adana studied him. "My father passed 2 years ago. His estate was small." "That is what you were allowed to believe," Solomon said. "That is what he wanted while you were choosing a husband. He did not want you chosen for money." She went very still. There is more, but not all today, Solomon said. Your father left you far more than you think. When the time is right, I will show you. For now, one instruction. He leaned in. Do not sign anything Obina puts in front of you. Nothing, no matter how small it looks. He hasn't asked me to sign anything, she said. He will, Solomon said, and when he does, you will call me first. He stood to go, then turned back. We are not planning revenge. This is handled like evidence, slowly, correctly, so it holds. He left her with a question and no answer. That was how it began. 3 days later, Obina came to her room with papers and a warm voice she did not trust anymore. Just a formality, he said, sliding them across the tray. Household accounts, the property, simple things. It's easier if I manage them while you recover. The pen was already uncapped in his hand. She looked at the papers. Transfer of authority. Her name at the top, his at the bottom. Do not sign anything, Solomon had said. I'm tired, Adana said softly. Leave them. I'll read them tomorrow. Obina's jaw tightened, but he smiled. Of course, rest. That night, when the ward was quiet, she called Solomon. He asked, she said. Then it has started, Solomon said. Bring me the papers, and Adana, from now on you write down everything, every date, every visit, every dollar that moves. You are not a patient anymore. You are the one keeping the record. She did not cry. She found a notebook. She began to write. The next morning she asked a nurse to photograph every page of the papers Obina had left. Then she read them slowly, twice. Buried in the middle, in language built to be skipped, was a line that gave him the power to act for her in any matter of business or health. Any matter of health. She underlined it once. Then she called Solomon and read it to him. He was silent for a moment. That clause, he said, is not for household accounts. That clause is for declaring a person unfit to decide for herself. The room felt colder. Why would he want that? She asked. That, Solomon said, is the next thing we find out. A question again, no answer. She did not sign. Over the next 2 weeks, from a wheelchair, with a notebook and a borrowed laptop, Adana began to pull threads. The first thread was money. She still had access to one old account, one Obina had forgotten to close. She read the statements line by line, and there, 3 months back, was a charge that made no sense, a large payment to a consulting firm she had never heard of, signed, the record said, by her. She had signed nothing. Someone opened a door in your name, Solomon said when she told him, and walked through it. Keep the statement. Do not tell him you saw it. New fact, new question. She wrote it down. The second thread was the firm itself. She looked it up, a small consulting outfit, barely a website, but one name sat on its client list, plain as day. Meridian Health Group. The company that owned the hospital she was lying in, the company Obina was trying to climb to the top of. Meridian, she said on the phone, her voice low, the firm that took money in my name works for Meridian. Why would a payment from me go to a firm that works for the very company my husband is chasing? Because someone is moving pieces on a board you cannot see yet, Solomon said, but you are close, closer than they know. Then show me the board, she said. Soon, he said. There is one more thing you must find on your own first, so that when I tell you, you believe it. The third thread was the merger. She had heard Obina talk about it for a year. Fold the clinics in, take Meridian bigger, put his name at the top. But he always said the same frustrated thing into the phone at night. We can't close it without the trust's approval. The trust won't move. The trust. She had never known which trust he meant. Now she wrote the word in her notebook and circled it 3 times. She called Solomon and asked him one direct question. What is the trust that controls Meridian? The line was quiet for a long time. "That," Solomon said, at last, "is your father's." "Your father's trust owns the hospital," she said slowly. "Controls it," Solomon corrected, "through the group. And the merger your husband is desperate to close cannot happen without that trust saying yes." A pause. "You asked me to show me the board. There it is. Your husband has spent a year begging a door to open. He does not know his own wife holds the key." She sat with the phone against her ear and did not speak. "There is still more," Solomon said gently, "but you have enough now to be careful. Say nothing, change nothing in how you act. Let them believe you are exactly what they think you are." "And what do they think I am?" she asked. "Finished," he said. She looked down at the locked box in her lap. She did not open it, not yet. For 3 weeks she played the part they had written for her, the broken wife, the quiet patient. She smiled small smiles. She let Nkiru lecture her. She let Obinna ignore her. And every night she wrote in the notebook. Then came the twist she did not see even watching as closely as she was. It came from Ronke. One afternoon, Ronke came to the hospital room herself. She had never done that before. She sat in the visitor's chair like she owned it, phone in hand, and she was pleasant in the way a knife is pleasant. "I wanted to meet you," Ronke said, "properly, before things move." "Before what moves?" Adana asked. "The group, the future. Obinna thinks he's driving it." She smiled. "He isn't. I am. He's useful for now. His name opens the boardroom, but when the merger closes, it won't be his group. It'll be mine." Adana kept her face still. "Why tell me this?" "Because you don't matter," Ronke said simply. "You're the one person in his life who can't hurt me, so I can be honest with you. It's almost restful." She stood. "There's paperwork moving that clears his wife out of the picture, a medical authority filing, very clean. Once you're declared unable to manage your affairs, every door with your name on it opens, including one Obinna doesn't even know is important yet." She tilted her head. "He thinks he's using that clause to control the household. He has no idea what it really unlocks." Then she left. Adana sat alone. She understood now. Obinna wanted the clause to control her. Ronke wanted the clause because she had figured out what Obinna had not, that Adana's name sat on top of the trust, and declaring Adana unfit would break the last wall between Ronke and the whole company. 2 people, 2 steams, and both of them needed to erase her. She called Solomon that night, and for the first time her voice shook, not with fear, but with something harder. "They're not just throwing me away," she said. "They're trying to have me declared unfit so they can take the trust. Ronke knows what it is. Obinna doesn't. She's using him." "Then it is worse than I feared, and better. Worse because they are moving on your father's legacy. Better because a filing like that leaves a trail. Forged signatures, false statements to a court. That is not divorce, Adana. That is a crime, and they are building it in writing." "Can you stop the filing?" "I can do better," Solomon said. "I can let them finish building the rope. Then we pull it tight in a room they cannot walk out of." "When?" he said. "In the atrium of that very hospital. Every partner, every board member. The merger vote is on the agenda." His voice was calm as still water. "You will be there, not as a patient, as the one who owns the table." She looked at the box. "There is one more thing you must know before that day," Solomon said, "and this one I will tell you in person." 2 days later he came, and he sat by her bed, and he told her the last of it. "Your father did not simply leave you money," Solomon said. "He named you, not a beneficiary, the successor. When he passed, control of the trust did not go to a bank or a board. It waited, dormant, for you to claim on the day you chose." He paused. "You have been the controlling owner of Meridian Health Group for 2 years, Adana. You simply never signed the paper that turns the key. Your father built it that way on purpose. He wanted you to have a life first, to be loved as a woman before you were feared as an owner." She could not speak. "The day you sign," Solomon said, "the hospital is yours, the group is yours, the merger lives or dies at your word, and every person who threw you into the cold works for you." He set a single document on the tray. "You do not have to sign today," he said, "but when you do, the world changes." She looked at it for a long time. Then she folded her hands over the wooden box and said, "Not yet. First they finish. Then I sign in the room." Solomon almost smiled. "Your father would be proud." She did not cry. She had 11 days. But she did not get 11, because the next morning Obinna decided he was done waiting. The discharge came fast and cruel. He had signed her out himself. He told the staff she was going home to be cared for privately. It was a lie. There was no care waiting. There was a curb. He wheeled her into the lobby. His mother came, Ronke came, phone up, and in front of the whole staff, in the place where they had nursed her for over a year, he said the words, "Get her out of my hospital." They did what he asked because he was an executive and she was only a woman in a chair. The security rolled her to the doors. The nurses looked away, ashamed. Obinna leaned down close so only she could hear and said, "You should have signed the papers. It would have been gentler." Adana looked up at him. "You'll wish I had," she said. He laughed. They left her on the curb with a small bag and a locked box, and they went back inside to plan their future. She did not cry. She took out her phone and made one call. "It's time," she said. "Bring the paper. I'm signing today." Solomon came within the hour. He found her exactly where they had left her, upright, calm, the box in her lap. He knelt beside the wheelchair and put the document on top of the box. "Once you sign," he said, "there is no undoing it. You become the most powerful person in that building." "I already am," she said. "I'm just going to make it official." She signed. And then, for the first time in her life, she took the small brass key that had lived on her father's chain, the one Solomon handed her from an envelope, and she opened the box. Inside was a single photograph of her father standing in front of Meridian General on the day it opened, young and proud, and beneath it, in his handwriting, a note. "I built this so no one would ever be turned away. If you are reading this, someone tried to turn you away. Now it is yours. Do better than they did." She held it for a long moment. Then she folded the note, tucked it into her pocket, and said, "Take me home, Solomon, and in 9 days bring me back through the front door." 9 days later, the atrium of Meridian General filled with the most important people in the group. Board members, partners, investors. The merger vote was the last item on the agenda, and everyone in the room believed Obinna Okafor was about to win the thing he had chased for a year. He stood at the front, confident, Ronke beside him, his mother watching from a good seat. He did not know the meeting had a new chair. The doors at the back opened. Adana came through them in her wheelchair, Solomon walking beside her, a folder in his hands. The same lobby, the same staff, some of them lining the walls now, the same doors they had pushed her out of. She rolled to the front of the room and stopped. Obinna's face went from confusion to anger. "This is a closed meeting. Security." "They work for her," Solomon said quietly. The room went still. Solomon opened the folder and spoke in a clear, calm voice. "For those who do not know her, this is Adana Okeke, daughter and named successor of Chief Nnamdi Okeke. As of 9 days ago, she has claimed control of the Okeke family trust." He let it land. "The trust is the controlling owner of Meridian Health Group, which means it owns this hospital, it owns the clinics on today's agenda, and it holds the deciding vote on the merger this room came to pass." Nobody breathed. Obinna's mouth opened and closed. "That is not possible," Ronke said, but her voice had lost its edge. "It has been true for 2 years," Solomon said. "She simply chose today to say so." Adana looked up at her husband. She did not raise her voice.
You spent a year begging the trust to say yes. You never once asked who the trust was. If you had ever really looked at me, you would have known, but you were too busy measuring the room." Obina's face was gray. "The merger vote is withdrawn," Adonis said to the room. "It will not proceed under this leadership, and the man who called this his hospital does not work here anymore." The room did not gasp. It exhaled, slowly, the way a room does when it realizes the truth has finally arrived. She had not shouted, she had not cried, she had simply told them who she was, and the whole weight of it fell on the three people who had thrown her away. That was peak one. The second blow came from the folder, because taking his job was not justice, it was only the beginning. Solomon set 3 more pages on the table where everyone could see. While Mrs. Okeke recovered, a filing was prepared to have her declared mentally unfit to manage her own affairs. It carried her signature. She never signed it. It's a forgery. It was built to strip her of the trust before she could claim it. He laid down the bank record. A firm was paid in her name without her knowledge to prepare that filing. The payment trail leads here. He laid down the last page. And this discharge order signed by Obina Okafor was dated and prepared 4 days before she was thrown out. The eviction was not anger, it was planned. They needed her gone from the building before the meeting so she could not walk through these doors. They failed by 9 days. Premeditated, in writing, a crime, not a divorce. Obina turned on Ronke. "You told me the filing was clean. You said it was just paperwork." And Ronke, cornered, did the thing that people like her always do. She saved herself. "She forced him," she said to the room, loud and fast. "It was his plan from the start. I have every message, every instruction. I'll give them all to the authorities." She was already backing toward the door. "I was only following the executive." Obina stared at her, understanding at last that he had never been the one driving. He had been the name that opened the boardroom, nothing more. His mother rose from her good seat, gathered herself, and tried the reasonable voice one last time. "Surely," Nkiru said, "we can settle this privately, as family." Adana looked at her. "You told me my son needs a wife who can stand. You were right. He needed someone standing. He just never noticed she was sitting down the whole time, holding everything he wanted." She turned to Solomon. "Give it all to the police, the forgery, the accounts, the dated order, every page." "Already copied," Solomon said. Obina was escorted out of the atrium by the same security who had once pushed his wife through it. Ronke was taken separately. Nkiru walked out alone, and no one offered her a good seat. Adana stayed. She did not celebrate. She wheeled to the front of the room, faced the board and staff, and got to work. That could have been the end. Justice done, the villains gone. But Adana's father had not built the hospital so she could win an argument. He had built it so no one would be turned away. So she built. In the months that followed, she did not sell the group, she ran it. She sat at the head of the table she had always owned, and she changed how it worked from the inside. She opened a new center in the East Wing and put her father's name over the door, the Nnamdi Okeke Center for Rehabilitation and Mobility. It was built for people like her, people whose bodies had changed and whose lives had been treated as over. She designed the ramps herself. She knew exactly where they needed to be. She wrote a rule into the hospital's charter in plain language no one could skip. No patient in this building could be discharged into unsafe hands. No one could be turned away for being inconvenient. She had learned from a curb exactly what that policy was worth. She hired back every nurse who had looked away that day, and she told them the truth. You were afraid of a man with a title. I understand fear, but this building belongs to the patients now, not to the loudest voice in the lobby. If someone is ever wheeled toward those doors again, you stop it. That is your job now. It is mine, too. They believed her because she had lived it. Obina was charged. The forged filing, the false accounts, the premeditated discharge, it was all in writing, exactly as Solomon had promised. Ronke's messages sank them both. The merger she had schemed for a year to steal never happened, and the company she wanted to own belonged fully and finally to the woman she called Restful, to be honest with, because she did not matter. Adana kept the photograph of her father in a frame on her desk, the one from the box, the young man standing proud in front of the building that was now hers. Some mornings she looked at it before the day began. She never opened that box again because it had already given her everything inside it. Not the papers, the words. Do better than they did. She did. 1 year after they left her on the curb, Adana sat at the front doors of Meridian General as the sun came up, in the exact spot where they had abandoned her. A young woman was being discharged that morning, newly in a wheelchair, frightened and with nowhere kind to go. Adana rolled up beside her. "You're scared, I know. I sat right here once, and I thought it was the end of my life." The young woman looked at her. "It wasn't," Adana said. "Come inside. We have a place for you." And she wheeled the girl back through the doors, into the building her father built, where no one would ever be turned away again. She did not cry. She smiled. Subscribe. I will see you in the next unforgettable story.
The airport fell silent as Chibuike tore his wife's passport into pieces, his mother laughing beside him. "Your father's surgery can wait," he sneered. Ngozi never reached for the torn pages. She was watching an elderly man in a wheelchair being rushed toward the gate. The moment he saw her, everything around them changed. Nobody standing in that terminal understood what they were witnessing. To them, it looked like an ordinary embarrassment. A husband losing his patience, a wife too proud to beg. Strangers slowed their steps to watch, the way people do when cruelty happens in public and curiosity beats manners. Chibuike stood tall in his tailored jacket, torn paper falling from his fingers like confetti at the wrong kind of celebration. Beside him, his mother, Mama Beatrice, folded her arms and smiled the smile of a woman who believed she was watching justice, not humiliation. And a few steps back, close enough to matter, stood Folasade, a woman from Chibuike's bank who had spent the last year convincing herself she deserved his life more than the woman standing in front of him. Ngozi did not move. She looked down at the torn pieces scattered near her shoes, then lifted her eyes, calm and unreadable, toward the gate behind them, where something was happening that none of them had noticed yet. An elderly man in a wheelchair was being rushed through the crowd, flanked by men who moved like they were paid to protect something valuable. Watch closely, because in the next few minutes, everything this family believed about the woman they had just humiliated was about to fall apart. "You heard me," Chibuike said, louder now, aware that people were watching and unable to stop himself from performing for them. "Your father's surgery has waited this long. It can wait a little more. We are not paying for another one of your emergency trips." Ngozi said nothing. She did not cry. She had learned, somewhere over the last 6 years, that tears were currency she refused to spend on people who didn't deserve to see them. He had no idea the woman he had just humiliated in front of strangers could have bought the airline they were standing inside of, twice over, and still had money left to build another one. If this story is already breaking something in your chest, stay with us, because it only gets heavier from here. Life is a story about a woman the world underestimated her whole life, and a man who was about to learn what silence can cost. 3 years before that airport, Ngozi lived in a house with marble floors and staff who called her our young madam. Her father, Chief Obafemi Oyelaran, built an industrial empire that touched steel, shipping, and real estate across 2 continents. A man whose name alone could open doors that stayed shut for everyone else. He loved his daughter the way powerful men often do, fiercely, but with conditions attached to that fierceness, believing that protecting her meant deciding her future for her. At 22, she was told she would marry a man from another wealthy family, a merger disguised as a wedding. She had met him twice. He spoke to her the way men speak to property they already own. When she tried to explain to her father that she wanted a life chosen by her own hands, he told her that love was a luxury poor people could afford to prioritize, and she was not poor. She left 3 days before the engagement was to be announced. She packed one bag and walked out of a house with 14 rooms, carrying nothing from that world except a wristwatch her father had given her on her 18th birthday. The only gift of his she had ever felt was given out of love rather than obligation. The clasp cracked the night she climbed over the back gate to avoid the driver stationed at the front. She never had it fixed. She wore it anyway, hidden under long sleeves. A small, quiet reminder of the moment she chose herself over everything she had been given. She built a new life from nothing, taking a modest job as an accounts clerk under a name close enough to her own that old friends wouldn't easily trace her, far enough that new ones never would. She met Chibuike 2 years later, a junior officer at a mid-sized bank with ambition sharp enough to cut. He was charming in the beginning, attentive in ways that felt like safety after years of being managed rather than loved. She told him her family situation was complicated and that she preferred not discussing it. He respected that boundary at first. Respect, like most things with Chibuike, had a shelf life. By their second year of marriage, his ambition had hardened into something else, an appetite that needed constant proof it was being fed. He began comparing her, quietly at first, to the wives of senior colleagues, women with visible wealth, degrees from abroad, confidence built on things you could see. Ngozi's calm, once the thing that drew him to her, slowly became, in his eyes, evidence of a woman with nothing worth showing off. "You have no ambition," he told her one night, after a dinner party where she said little and listened much. She only looked at him, the way she always did when his words tried to make her small. She did not cry. She had learned that peace does not require anyone's permission to exist, even inside a house that had stopped feeling like a home. What none of them knew, not Chibuike, not his mother, not the woman circling their marriage like a bird waiting for a branch to break, was that the woman they dismissed as ordinary had walked away from more money than their entire family had seen across 3 generations. And she had done it on purpose, because she had learned the hard way what money does to the people who chase it. By the 3rd year, cracks that had been quiet started making noise. Chibuike began staying late at the bank, his phone always face down on tables, its screen lighting up at hours that meant nothing good. Folasad, a senior relationship manager 2 ranks above him, had noticed something in Chibuike that most people missed, a hunger for validation dressed up as ambition. She fed that hunger carefully, telling him things his wife never did, that he was destined for more, that men who worked as hard as he did deserved partners who understood the game, not women who hid in the background. Folasade's motive wasn't simple greed, though greed played its part. She had spent 15 years watching men rise past her at the bank while she trained them, carried their mistakes quietly, and received none of the credit. She had convinced herself that attaching herself to a rising star like Chibuike wasn't manipulation. It was correction, a way of finally getting what years of overlooked labor should have earned her. She told herself she deserved this. People rarely admit, even to themselves, when ambition has curdled into something uglier. Mama Beatrice, for her part, believed she was protecting her son. She had raised Chibuike alone after his father left, and she measured love in visible sacrifice and visible reward. A daughter-in-law who brought nothing tangible to the family, no dowry worth speaking of, no family name to leverage, no children yet after 3 years, registered to her as a failure she refused to let her son suffer quietly. A man like you needs a wife who can stand beside you, not behind you, she told Chibuike one Sunday afternoon, right in front of Ngozi, as if she weren't in the room at all. That girl has given you nothing. No child. No name we can even speak of at family functions. Ngozi set the tea tray down without a word and left the room. She did not cry. But that night, alone, she took out her father's wristwatch, held it in her palm, and let herself remember, for just a moment, what it felt like to be protected instead of measured. The betrayal deepened in ways she could see, and ways she couldn't yet. Chibuike began mentioning Folasad's name with a familiarity that had nothing to do with work. He came home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't Ngozi's. He grew short-tempered over small things, a delayed dinner, a quiet evening, anything that gave him space to think about the comparison Folasade had planted in his mind between the wife he had and the life he believed he deserved. And then the call came. It was a Tuesday afternoon when her phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Obina, her father's longtime assistant, his voice cracking as he spoke. "Madam, your father collapsed 4 days ago. His heart. The doctors say surgery cannot wait much longer. He is asking for you. Only you." She stood in her kitchen, holding the phone, and for the first time since she left that house at 22, tears rose in her that had nothing to do with Chibuike or his family at all. She did not let them fall yet. There was too much to arrange, and grief, she had learned long ago, could wait its turn. She told Chibuike that night, expecting nothing, and receiving exactly that. He barely looked up from his phone. "Your father," he repeated flatly. "The one you never talk about. The one you've claimed for 3 years has nothing to do with you." He laughed, short and cold, the kind of laugh that comes from a man who has decided, somewhere along the way, that his wife's private pain is evidence against her rather than something worth understanding. Convenient timing, don't you think? Right when there are rumors about money at the bank. She hadn't heard the rumors yet, whispers Folasade had quietly planted among Chibuike's colleagues, suggesting Ngozi came from money she was hiding, money that made Chibuike look foolish for working so hard while his wife sat on some secret fortune. It was a lie built to look like truth, designed to turn his insecurity into anger he could aim somewhere. She said nothing in her own defense. She booked the flight herself that night, packed one small bag, and asked only for peace on the way to the airport. Instead, she received an audience. Because Chibuike, humiliated by whispers he half believed and half resented, decided that morning he would teach his wife a lesson about who controlled their household. He brought his mother for support. He brought Folasade too, introducing her at the check-in counter as someone from the bank helping with logistics, though anyone watching could see there was nothing professional in the way she stood close enough to touch his arm. At the counter, in front of a growing crowd, Chibuike reached across and took the passport from Ngozi's hand before the airline attendant could scan it. "You are not getting on this flight to go running toward people who abandoned you the moment life got complicated. he said, loud enough that heads turned throughout the terminal. This whole story about your father, it's an excuse. You've never even shown me a photograph of this man in 3 years of marriage. Before she could answer, he tore the passport in half, then in half again. The pieces fell between them, and for a moment the entire gate area went quiet with the particular silence that follows public cruelty. The silence of strangers deciding whether to intervene or simply watch. Mama Beatrice laughed, a short, satisfied sound. Folasade looked away, smiling faintly, already imagining a future where this woman no longer existed in it. Ngozi stood still. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She simply looked past all three of them, toward the gate, where a commotion had begun. Airport staff moving with unusual urgency, a wheelchair being pushed through the crowd at a pace reserved for people whose comfort mattered to someone very powerful. An elderly man sat in that wheelchair, an oxygen tube resting beneath his nose, flanked by two men in dark suits who cleared a path like they had done this 100 times before. He was thinner than she remembered, his face pale with the particular exhaustion of a body fighting itself, but his eyes, sharp, unmistakable, the same eyes she saw in the mirror every morning, found her from 30 feet away and held on. He had defied his own doctors to make this trip, refusing surgery until he had seen his daughter one final time, unwilling to let a decade of silence be the last word between them if his heart gave out on the table. Chibuiki had no idea what that torn passport was about to cost him. He had no idea whose gaze had just settled on him from across that terminal, or what that gaze would mean for the rest of his life. "Papa," Ngozi whispered, the word breaking something loose in her chest that 6 years of composure had held carefully in place. Chibuike turned to see who she was speaking to, confusion crossing his face, the torn passport still clutched in his hand like a small, meaningless trophy. The old man's assistant stepped forward first, speaking urgently to an airport official, who went visibly pale before immediately reaching for a radio. Word moved through the terminal staff the way electricity moves through wire, not gossip, but the fast, disciplined recognition of people realizing exactly whose presence they were standing inside of. "Sir," the official said, hurrying toward the group, breathless. "Chief Oyalaran, please, your daughter's documentation. We will resolve this immediately, right this way. Please." Oyalaran. The name landed on Chibuike like something cold poured slowly down his spine. He knew that name. Everyone at his bank knew that name. Chief Obafemi Oyalaran, the reclusive industrialist whose companies quietly touched half the infrastructure projects across the region. A man so private that most junior staff assumed the name belonged only to boardroom memos, not a living person who might, one day, be standing 20 feet away from them at an airport gate. "Papa," Ngozi said again, kneeling beside the wheelchair, taking his frail hand in both of hers, careful of the tubes and wires connecting him to a small portable monitor one of his men carried. "You shouldn't have come. Your heart can't take this kind of stress." "My heart," Chief Oyalaran said, his voice weak but carrying the same authority it always had, "has been aching for 11 years, wondering if I would ever see you again. A little more risk today changes nothing that matters." He looked past her shoulder at Chibuike, at the torn passport still in his hand, and something in his expression shifted from love to a quiet, devastating disappointment that needed no raised voice to land. "This is your husband?" Ngozi didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. The scattered pieces of paper on the floor answered for her. Chief Oyalaran studied Chibuike for a long, unbearable moment, long enough for the younger man to feel, for the first time in his adult life, genuinely and completely small. "Do you know," the old man said slowly, each word deliberate, "what my daughter walked away from to build a life on her own terms? A fortune most men spend their entire careers chasing. And she chose instead a quiet life, asking nothing from anyone, until the man she married decided to tear up her identity in an airport because he could not be bothered to ask who her father was. The crowd that had gathered moments earlier to witness a domestic humiliation now stood witnessing something else entirely. Phones that had been filming Ngozi's embarrassment slowly turned toward the old man instead, sensing, correctly, that the real story had only just begun. "I don't understand," Chibuiki said, his voice cracking slightly, the confidence that had carried him through the last 10 minutes draining visibly from his face. "You said—" He turned to Ngozi, desperate now. "You told me your family had nothing to do with you anymore. You told me there was no money." "I never lied to you," Ngozi said quietly, standing now, her father's hand still in hers. "I told you I chose not to touch it. There is a difference, Chibuike. You simply never cared enough to ask what that difference meant, because the answer you assumed already suited you fine." Folasad, standing a few feet back, had gone completely silent, her face draining of color as she recalculated in real time exactly how much she had gambled on the wrong woman being the fool in this marriage. Whatever future she had imagined for herself beside Chibuike evaporated the instant she understood there was no hidden fortune to inherit through him, only a man whose career was about to be shadowed by a scandal she herself had helped ignite. Mama Beatrice's laughter had long since disappeared. She stood frozen, staring at the wheelchair, at the two men in suits, at the airport officials now bowing slightly as they cleared a private lounge for the family. And she understood, in that instant, that everything she believed she knew about her son's marriage had been built on a foundation she never once bothered to check. Chief Oyalaran turned to the officials. "Get my daughter a new passport today. Whatever it costs, whatever needs to be expedited, I will cover it myself." Then, more quietly, to Ngozi, "Come home with me. Let's go see the doctors together, the way we should have all along." She rose to her feet, still holding her father's hand, and looked at Chibuike one final time. "You spent 3 years asking why I never wanted more from you," she said, her voice steady, almost gentle. "I didn't want more because I had already seen what more does to people. I watched money turn my own father into a man who tried to choose my life for me. I thought loving you quietly would protect us both from that same trap. I was wrong. It only protected you from ever having to earn me." She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She simply turned and walked beside her father's wheelchair toward the private lounge, leaving Chibuike standing among torn pieces of paper that had just cost him far more than he could yet understand. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who never bothered to ask who you really were, you already know exactly what this moment feels like. Stay with me, because what happens next, none of them saw coming. The fall came quickly after that, the way it usually does once a secret this large stops being a secret. Within days, word had spread through Chibuike's bank that his estranged father-in-law was Chief Obafemi Oyalaran, and that the marriage was, by every account that mattered, finished. His colleagues, who had once quietly pitied him for his plain, humble wife, now regarded him with a different curiosity entirely, the kind reserved for men who threw away a fortune out of pure carelessness. His branch manager worried about the bank's reputation should any part of the airport incident circulate further, quietly moved him off two accounts he had spent years building, citing restructuring that fooled no one. Folasay had distanced herself almost overnight. Whatever she had imagined for her future beside Chibuiki dissolved the moment she understood there was no wealth to access through him, only a man now carrying a scandal that made him a liability rather than an opportunity. She stopped answering his calls within a month, then blocked his number entirely when he grew persistent. She had never wanted Chibuike for himself. She had wanted what she believed came attached to him, and when that possibility disappeared, so did she. Mama Beatrice tried, in her own way, to reach out to Ngozi. A phone call here, a message there, each one beginning with some version of, "We didn't know. We never would have treated you that way if we had understood who your family was." Ngozi read every message. She answered none of them, not out of cruelty, but because she finally understood something she hadn't fully accepted before. Their kindness had always come with conditions, waiting patiently on a name they had never once bothered to ask her for. Chibuike, for his part, tried exactly once to see her again. He flew to Geneva 2 months later, stood outside the private clinic where her father was recovering, and waited nearly an hour before a member of the household staff finally allowed him a few minutes in the hallway. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice smaller than she had ever heard it. "I let my pride get in the way of who you actually are." Ngozi looked at him with something closer to sadness than anger. "You didn't make a mistake about who I am," she said. "You made a mistake about what mattered to you. You spent years measuring me against women with louder names and more visible confidence, and the whole time, you were married to a woman who could have given you a life beyond anything you can imagine, if you had simply chosen to love her without needing to know the price first." "Can we fix this?" he asked, and there was something almost genuine in the question. A man finally seeing clearly what he had lost, even if the seeing came far too late to matter. "Some things don't need fixing," she said quietly. "They need to be released." She turned and walked back into her father's recovery room, and that was the last conversation they ever had. The divorce that followed was quiet, without spectacle, without lawyers fighting publicly over headlines the way lesser stories often become. Ngozi asked for nothing from him. No property, no settlement, nothing carrying his name attached to it. She wanted only the one thing she had come for in the first place: her father, alive, and whatever time remained for them to repair 11 years of silence. Chief Oyalaran's recovery took months, slow and careful, and in that time, father and daughter finally did what they had never allowed themselves to do across more than a decade apart. They simply talked about the marriage he had once tried to arrange for her without asking what she wanted, about her fear that love only ever arrived wrapped in obligation, a lesson she had learned watching how power reshaped the people closest to her father, about the cracked wristwatch, which she finally showed him one evening, the clasp still broken from the night she climbed over a back gate to escape a life chosen for her rather than by her. He wept when he saw it. An old man who had spent his fortune building an empire and had somehow never understood until that moment that the only thing his daughter had ever truly wanted from him was permission to choose her own life. "I should have fixed that watch myself," he told her, holding it gently in his hands. "Instead, I let you carry it broken for 11 years because I was too proud to reach out first." "It doesn't need fixing anymore," she told him, taking it back gently. "It just needed you to see it." With her father's blessing and with savings she had quietly built herself over the years through careful, independent investments Chibuiki never knew existed, choosing to grow something small and hers rather than depend on the life he offered. Ngozi started a foundation the following spring. It offered scholarships and startup grants to young women from ordinary backgrounds. Women who, like her once, had learned to make themselves smaller than their worth so that no one would question them, or worse, want them for the wrong reasons entirely. She named it after the 11 years she had spent building an ordinary life on purpose, a name only she and her father truly understood. She kept one object from the wreckage of her old marriage, not the torn passport, which the airline quietly replaced within hours and which she forgot entirely within days, but her father's wristwatch, repaired now by a careful jeweler in Geneva, its clasp finally whole after 11 years. It sat on the desk of her new office, no longer a wound she hid beneath long sleeves, but proof of exactly what she had survived and exactly who she had chosen to become on her own terms. Chibuike, from a distance he could never quite close again, watched her name begin appearing in business circles, not as anyone's wife, not even as anyone's daughter, but simply as her own name, standing entirely on its own. He understood, finally, and far too late, that the woman he had torn a passport in front of at that airport had never been small at all. He had simply never taken the time to look closely enough to see her. If there is one thing I want you to carry with you from this story tonight, let it be this: never measure someone's worth by how loudly they announce it. The quietest people in any room are often carrying the heaviest truths, the deepest histories, the most unshakable strength. And one day, without warning, without needing to raise their voice even once, the truth always finds its moment to stand up and speak for itself. She did not cry, not because she felt nothing, but because she had already learned, long before that airport, that peace does not need permission to survive even the cruelest storm. If this story moved something in you tonight, hit like since where you're watching from. Which moment hit you hardest? The torn passport falling to the floor, or the wheelchair rolling quietly through that crowd, carrying a truth none of them saw coming? Stay with me, because there are many more stories like this one still waiting for you. And I promise you, the next one hits